Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. This is Priha Vaisberba, counseling psychologist here at Socially Soul, and today we are back with another video, but this time we are going to be discussing about an experiment. This is a very famous experiment in psychology which studies the concept of obedience. I'm sure most of you here, especially if you're from psychology background, you have definitely heard about the Milgram Experiment, right? So let's discuss a little bit about what that experiment is and what was the conclusion about. All right, so there was this psychologist, his name was Stanley Milgram, and in 1961 is when he conducted his experiment in Yale University. And the reason of conducting the experiment was to understand that even after the World War II, or during the World War II actually, how did ordinary people engage in the war? I'm telling you, go kill these people and you're torturing and putting them into gas chambers and you're killing them just in the name of authority. How did ordinary people engage in such things during Nazi Germany? How was it even possible? And this was a very big question. And that is why Milgram wanted to study what is it about obedience that people cannot say no to. Right, so in his experiment, what he did was he took some group of volunteers and he told them that this is a study which is based on the learning and memory of participants basically. So then it was divided into two sections, one were the teachers, the others were the learners. So teachers are the one who are going to ask a question and the learner has to answer. Right, now the twist here is that every time the teacher asks a question and the learner is not able to answer, the teacher has to give an electric shock, right? Now, this is something that was made very clear to them that this is real shock, and for every wrong response, you have to administer the shock, okay? And though the experimenter kept saying that, this is just to check learning and memory, but the experimenter was dressed also like in a white lab coat, which was signifying credibility as long as also at the same time showing authority on the experimenter's hand, right? Now, another thing was here that the learners were not actually participants. They were actors and they were very well aware that, and there were no actual electric shocks. And they were very well aware that, okay, I have to give a wrong response. And because we wanted to check that, in the name of authority, how much are these teachers are going to, actually administer an electric shock because they really believe it's an electric shock. So, and obviously it was not possible and it was not ethical also to give electric shock. So that is why these learners, they were actors and they were just asked to act, right? This was the basic gist. Now what happens that, so there were two different rooms and the teachers and the learners were not directly visible to each other. All right. So the teachers would ask a question in the mic. The learners would give a wrong response because that is what was planned. And every time there was a wrong response, the teacher was giving an electric shock. Now, as a matter of fact, towards the end, it was seen that 65% of participants, that is more than 2/3 of the participant, actually administered electric shock. And it's not like they weren't showing that they were distressed about it. They were saying that, let's not do it, or, I'm not comfortable doing it. But the experimenter with the white lab coat would come and say that, it's important that you continue this for the experiment, or that you have to continue this, or you have to do this. And the learner could have just, the teacher could have just got up and left, but they did not. They continued being participants. They continued giving electric shocks. The electric shocks, they went from mild to a very deadly voltage as well. It went from somewhere about 15 to 450. 450 volt is deadly. Right now, according to the teacher, they were doing because the authority asked them to do, right? And this is what they said towards the end also. But this raises a question, and this was the conclusion that, in the name of authority, people are ready to obey, even though they know they're harming someone else. Like in their day-to-day life, they may not actually go and harm a person to that deadly level, but because now this is coming from authority, they were ready to do that as well. So now it gives the conclusion of why people obey. There are two things. One thing is authority. So whenever you have someone who comes from the authority figure or someone, like the lab coat and everything, we tend to believe them because we feel that we have to obey to authority. Otherwise, something wrong will happen. We don't want to be an outgroup. We do not want consequences of not following instructions of the authority figure. Second was proximity. The very fact that the teacher could not see the learner, even though the learner was constantly screaming and they were in pain, and obviously they were actors, but they were screaming that way, that it's really hurting them. They were begging the teacher to stop. But because there was no face attached to it, you could not directly see their face. So that in a way allowed the teacher to continue administering shock at the same time. Now, even though this experiment was highly criticized, I mean, why would it not be? Because all the ethics went to the drain. You know, like a lot of actually teachers, it was a very traumatizing experience for them, because they did believe that, you know, people were really hurt, and even though they were debriefed towards the end. But you know, just imagine you are in that situation and you are listening to authority who is saying give electric shock, and you can hear the other person is screaming and crying and begging you that please don't do this, please, and you're having to put that electric shock, even if it's that 450 volt. Imagine how distressing that would be, right? And obviously the actors were also like really good actors, and they were like, yes, it's paining, but you still go ahead and you did it, right? So now obviously because of that it was majorly criticized, and that is actually also what gave to rise to a lot of ethics that today we follow, like for example informed consent, or you know, the fact that you can withdraw from an experiment at any point of time during the experiment is going on. That is also something which is a very major ethic today, right? But yes, this was about the experiment, and one thing that we learned from this experiment is, you know, we should not just blindly follow authority. We do have the conception that okay, if tomorrow someone is in the position of an authority figure, they must have done something right. You know, they must know things. That is why they're standing there. That is why they're there. But it's not necessary that they will always be right. You know, so that is something, whenever we have instructions from authority, it is something that we should question and see, are we following it correctly, or is it incorrect to follow their instructions? You know, going against authority, even though it makes you sometimes feel anxious, but you need to question when to follow, when not to follow. All right. So do let me know what you think about this video. Think about it. If you were in 1961 and you were a volunteer and you were a teacher, in the name of authority, would you really administer the shocks to the learners? See you in the next video.